I love wild shib. Don't know what that means, but it's true. Because, my friends, as wrestling never does stop, sometimes the most random stuff gets through. Today I thought we should celebrate that. Give me the bonkers. Sounds rude. So thank you for joining me as always, because I am Simon Miller, and this is Wild Shit in Wrestling that we totally forgot. Number 10, Stone Cold's Weird Return. This wasn't anybody's fault, and if anything, Steve Austin should be commended for showing up. If he had passed on it, I would have understood. But as 316 Day rolled around in March 2020, the pandemic hit. That meant no more fans, no more crowd. All shows are going to the Performance Center. It sucked. Now, to be fair, it wasn't too bad at this point because it was all so wild. It was like we had started wrestling again. I suppose WWE felt like they needed as much as possible to help. Oh, yes, they did ask the Rattlesnake to appear because he was already on the adverts. It was still so bizarre to see him walk down the aisle to quietness, however, as that had never happened in that man's career. Given there wasn't much he could do either, he soon invited Byron Saxton of all people into the ring and gave him a stunner. Then Becky Lynch arrived to celebrate too. I have no idea. Austin himself, after the fact, admitted this wasn't all that great and that he had asked Vince McMahon if he could head in a different direction. Apparently the answer was no. Just know as well, you never have to watch this. It will not improve your life at all. What a stupid time to be alive. Number 9, the Backlash Monster. I am still waiting for an update with this, because you know me, still the same OG. I love goofy wrestling. It does tie into our last entry, because yep, it's the pandemic again. WWE were just trying whatever they could. Therefore, the Street Profits and the Viking Raiders engaged in a war around the Performance Center in some sort of no-fans fight, and eventually ended up in a dumpster outside. Where else was it going to go? The thing is, when they all came to and looked upwards, we essentially saw some sort of monster attacking them. And no, I'm not making this up. It was sort of left as they had been eaten alive too, when they were just okay. What the hell is happening? Creative has never mentioned this again, so it's a proper mystery. And I need to know, what if this beast strikes again? We need to be ready. To be fair, I bet a lot of wrestlers on that roster were super pleased this did vanish. You just know Vince McMahon at least one point thought about making this a permanent gimmick. The COVID monster of death. Number 8, the oddest match ever. Do you remember the Celebrity Raw General Manager phase? That was crap, wasn't it? Yes it was. This was mostly because our famous friends only came onto Raw as a promotional tool and clearly thought that wrestling was stupid. The phrase phoning it in was used a lot. Cedric the Entertainment, bless him, felt different because he actually wanted a match. And he got it. This was on the 23rd of September 2009 where he challenged Chavo Guerrero, and the main piece of trivia was Santo Morella was the special guest referee. So this was played for laughs as it should have been. It got quite strange as Hornswoggles and others dressed up as Cedric before the man himself returned to get the pin. And that does me. In the record books, the Entertainer has a win over wrestling family royalty. It's got to be said though, at least he was game, because some of the other people that did this, sheesh, it was like pulling teeth. Should have stayed at home. Number 7, Degeneration X promoted WCW. After Shawn Michaels helped with the Montreal Screwjob in 1997, it's not like it was a one and done. Nope. In fact, for the next few weeks on Raw, Degeneration X would take shots as much as they could. This is when we saw HBK beat up a little person that was dressed up as Bret Hart, and they even beat up his former teammate Jim Neidhart. It was all a little bit tasteless. There was also no rules because after the anvil had been floored, DX got out the spray paint and graffitied his back like they were the NWO. When they clearly knew what they were doing. This was in December and Jim debuted for the competition in January, so guess what words they scrawled on his body? That's right, WCW. This was a very different time. I mean, these days it would be like Sheamus beating up Edge and ensuring AEW was on his tuchus before he left, and that is never happening ever. It wouldn't even be a conversation. This is why the Monday Night Wars would actually break some current fans. The gloves were off and that was that. Let the shots be fired. Number 6, TNA's Hall of Fame madness. Go and watch this. I mean it, because it is so weird. In fact, you could likely just sit down with friends and choose TNA 2010 or WCW 2000s if you do want to be confused. That's the levels we're talking because it just goes so loopy from nowhere to. If you do decide to pick TNA, eventually you'll come to the point where Abyss and Hulk Hogan are becoming friends, with Hogan really sad the masked man has become a scaredy cat. Once again, I'm not kidding. Trying to find out how he could switch this around, Hulk came up with the best plan, and he gave Abyss his Hall of Fame ring. Yes, you heard that right. Hogan also claimed if Abyss wore this, he'd become the king of wrestling like he was the flipping Green Lantern or something. Furthermore, this was TNA comparing jewelry from WWE as holding superpowers. What are we doing? We carried on with this as well and told fans to believe that Abyss now had extra oomph because he was wearing a ring. You'd be shocked to hear this didn't click with audiences, and eventually everybody forgot about it. Not Abyss, though. He has to live with this for the rest of his life. Number 5, Chris Jericho trashes WWF TV. Now, obviously, all of this was agreed upon, but in hindsight, it was such a strange way to introduce a WCW guy to WWF TV. Let us not pretend otherwise either. Chris Jericho's 1999 debut was one of the best of all time, and he was going head-to-head with The Rock. Not gonna regret that move. He then decided to tell the Great One how boring he was and that Raw sucked when he found The Undertaker on a different show, and like Britney, he did it again. Told the dead man he was boring and his promos were awful. The rumor has always been this actually did rub some of the guys the wrong way, but there's no way this didn't get the green light. So what was the plan here? It was an individual from a rival saying he'd seen way better than this. Poor Chris then had to start again from the bottom, but we do need more info here. I know people have spoken about it, but it just doesn't add up. Imagine Cody came back in 2022 and said, geez, Raw is crap these days. I mean, he wouldn't have done, because there's no way that would have gone down. Number 4, Edge kidnaps Paul Bearer. Here's why WCW dying was an issue for WWE. Eventually, with no competition, they sort of fell into the same madness. They couldn't help it. There's tons we could talk about, but let's go slightly under the radar. When Edge kidnapped Paul Bearer. That's right. The Rated R superstar did this because he was at war with Kane, and I think we were supposed to be sympathetic towards Paul and his son. This was hard though, as the Big Red Machine had been outed as a potential necrophiliac, and Bearer was well into burning stuff. WWE had been telling us this for over a decade by 2010. There was also a moment during this where Edge tried to trick Kane into murdering his fake dad when Uncle Paul took a nasty spill. I can't lie, a lot of this was quite amusing because it felt like everybody had just gone high. The real crazy part of all of this is that WWE soon gave up, but not because they thought it was bad, they just thought it was the wrong time, so number 3, Randy Orton kidnaps Paul Bearer. That's right. 2 years later in April 2012, Randy Orton thought he would pay homage to Edge and kidnap Paul Bearer while feuding with Kane. But by this point, Kane wouldn't care, like breathing oxygen is just gonna happen. This one went totally off because Big Red did save his father from a freezer, when he then put him back in the freezer to kill him. So you saved him in order to murder him. Somebody please make it make sense. There is a sad spin to this as it was Bearer's final appearance before he passed away, so he really should have had a better send-off. I mean, Kane literally wheels Paul out of the freezer before turning him around and putting him back in. Bearer then screams, "Oh no!" It's shite. Orton won, I suppose, as he beat Kane in a Falls Count Anywhere match at Extreme Rules, and then he vanished. Wasn't a storyline though. This is because he got himself suspended after a wellness policy violation. Whoops. Number 2, explaining the explosion. I loved all of this. Everybody involved with the failed explosion during Revolution 2021's exploding barbed wire death match was mad. And you would be. All that planning and then you got sparklers. It's not great. When they had all calmed down now, they changed tact and thought, screw it. We can't change what's happened, so let's just have a laugh about it. That's the right way to deal with life. It started with Eddie Kingston, who said he wasn't feigning unconsciousness at the pay-per-view, but instead had blacked out due to anxiety. And I can buy that. He thought he was about to die. Kenny Omega then laid into Edward, trying to save Moxley by laying over him as he shouted at then-friend Don Callis to 69 him. I laughed when I wrote that down. It is so immature and dumb. This was way better than everybody ignoring it though, and again, there was no sorting this out after the fact, so why not try and protect the baby faces and make the heels look like idiots? It is important to note there is some unfairness here. 99% of that match is utterly brutal, and it's just the ending that didn't fly. We shouldn't forget that. Omega and Mox almost killed themselves. Number 1, the karaoke battle. This is pure Vince McMahon off-the-rails stuff, and while the new era is better, I mean, the changes in the attitude of one Jey Uso. We do have to mention this was mid-pandemic, so I get it, everybody was pulling at straws here. But when WWE decided to do a karaoke contest on the 10th of July 2020 SmackDown, I don't understand it. It also had a name too, the first ever karaoke showdown, like it was going to tempt in all the fans as Naomi, Dana Brooke, Tamina, and Lacey Evans were all going to battle it out by singing. It got even worse because the song entrances were entrance themes from yesteryear, when Naomi and Lacey Evans just fought. I mean, why not? It is wrestling, and it stopped the renditions of the Honky Tonk Man and Triple H's The Game. You do not need to hear this. Jey Uso was also hosting this and had to act like he cared. And really, it was like a weird mini-game you'd find on WWF Attitude on the PS1 or Nintendo 64. It's just so out of nowhere. I wouldn't even call it goofy because it's way beyond that. I really would like to know the thought process that went into this, because it was a huge mistake. Know of any other wild shit in pro wrestling? Make sure you leave me a comment below before you like the video, share the video, and subscribe. If you do want another list narrated by me, click that video on the screen right now. Otherwise, thank you very much for joining me, my friends. I will talk to you again very, very soon.